Nikita, you mentioned that 10 of your compatriots, 10 Global Sumud Land Convoy volunteers, they were kidnapped in East Libya as they made the decision of proceeding.
The security forces that were present there at the checkpoint allowed 10 people to enter in. It was with their permission and upon their invitation that these 10 comrades of ours went inside to try to negotiate a way further, right? Because they had cut off all communication with us. And we are here for a humanitarian cause. It's been more than 20 days now that they've been in there, and it's very tough for us to get any communication back and forth. And if we feel like this on the outside, that there is no communication and we are so stressed about this, I can't even imagine what the 10 inside feel like.
I'm curious as to how you viewed this apparent inconvenience that is associated with acts like your decision to join the convoy.
Egypt had said that you have come here for a humanitarian purpose. Your tourist visa is not valid for acts like this. So it makes you think that all these rules that have been set up are not to help the people do good things, right? These rules, these institutions, this system has been set up by people in power to help continue their control and their help maintain power in their hands. Why did I want to go into Gaza is because I believe that it's the epicenter of 21st century colonialism. And that's why I wanted to do something there. I mean, today it's in Gaza, tomorrow it can be in our backyard.
In the spring of 2026, a global movement of rights defenders, humanitarians, doctors, students, union workers, teachers, and seafarers set out for Gaza on land and sea to break the illegal blockade imposed by Israel. The Global Sumud Flotilla had the stated purpose of helping Palestinians assert their right to access their coast and the world beyond it. The mission was also going to deliver life saving aid, including food, material for shelter, and other essentials like baby formula, medicine, and school supplies. Just a day ago, the UN High Commissioner for Human Rights had noted that in Gaza, Israeli forces have killed almost 1,000 Palestinians since the ceasefire was announced last October. Most of them are civilians. Globally, the consensus is that Israel's actions in Gaza are and have been genocidal. Israeli forces' violent interception of the sea vessels that were proceeding to Gaza made news, as did Israel's National Security Minister Itamar Ben Gvir's decision to release videos appearing to taunt and humiliate detained flotilla activists. But at the same time, there was a land convoy comprising dozens of trucks carrying aid and reconstruction material, which aimed to travel through Mauritania, Algeria, Tunisia, Libya, and Egypt. In the land convoy were doctors, engineers, teachers, and the lone Indian climate activist Nikita Naidu. What happened to this land convoy? What happened to the activists like Nikita who were on it? And was it able to proceed to Gaza through Rafah? We are very happy to have Nikita herself on our show to shed some light on the historic land convoy that attempted to travel through North Africa and reach Gaza. Nikita, thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me, Somashri.
Nikita, reports on you, they have described you as the first and the only Indian activist in the Global Sumud Flotilla's land convoy. Can you tell us a little bit about yourself and your decision to join this arduous journey to Rafah overland?
Yeah, so I work on climate change. I'm a climate change professional. I've worked with several state governments and I work at grassroots level. My work has always been about supporting vulnerable people from injustices. And I also do a bit of activism. And uh, that's how I got into the Palestine work. I only got to know about what's going on in Gaza, Israel Palestine issue only after 2023 October. And uh, the singular thought that I used to have was that I just want to be able to walk into Gaza and help the people there. And Global Sumud Flotilla was the way that I could do it, whether by sea or by land, right? That the intent was to go into Gaza and help them. And I am a volunteer, I am a social worker, so I can organize. So that's what I wanted to do. Initially they were actually supposed to be uh, and and why did I want to go into Gaza is because I believe that it's the epicenter of 21st century colonialism. um, and that's why I wanted to do something there. I mean, today it's in Gaza, tomorrow it can be in our backyard, right? The way the world is going. And initially, there were supposed to be 10 of us going into the sea convoy through the boats, but for many, many reasons, legal, health reasons, visas getting rejected, we eventually couldn't make it on the sea convoy. And then we got to know about the land convoy almost like last minute. Three of us were supposed to go, but two had to back out because of a health emergency in their family. And I ended up being the only person going. But there are a lot of people from India who want to go. It's just that this time it just proved very difficult for it. Ended up that I was the only one.
So I'm going to go straight away into the question that has been on my mind since we first spoke, Nikita. The organizers of the land convoy of which you were a part, they've noted that the Rafah crossing opens and closes at the will of the perpetrators of a genocide. Um, I'm curious, were you able to break through the barricades? And more broadly, what was your experience like on the land convoy?
To start off, the first pleasant thing when you land, I joined the land convoy in Libya, in Tripoli, right? The first thing that you realize is the majority of the voices around you are not that of English, right? You have all these other different languages being spoken. The organizers speak two different languages: Arabic, Turkish, Tunisian, different cultures, different backgrounds. In an international convoy, you would just assume that it would be mostly English speaking people, but it's not. Their native is not English. And that was just a beautiful thing because you need all these perspectives, right? That was I would say, the best part of the convoy, that you get all these different perspectives. It's very important for an international movement to survive, especially when we are fighting such large forces. And uh, I actually had to make the unfortunate decision of leaving the camp on 23rd May because we got legitimate information that if we moved ahead, we were at that point camped at the West and East Libya border near the city of Sirte, which is in East Libya, right? At the checkpoint, we were camping, trying to get into East Libya. We were trying to negotiate our way in, but we got legitimate information that there would be violence, there might be abduction and things like that. And understanding the diplomatic situation between India and other countries, and just the lack of legal representation you would find in East Libya, I had to make the decision to leave the convoy just one day before, and the next day is when the other brave hearts went ahead, because at the end of the day, we're doing this for Palestine. And uh, uh, 10 of us did get captured. Uh, and we also saw how complicit state machineries are. West Libya supported us throughout the journey. It was a tough journey, even inside West Libya, but they did support us. And to be stopped at the checkpoint between West and East Libya is something we did not imagine at all, because the communication we had with East Libya, Egypt, through Red Crescent, made it seem like it was a positive way that we would be allowed through. All the paperwork was done, everything that they asked for, we gave them information. But somehow they just shut down all communication eventually. So yeah, we couldn't go through at all. We couldn't even get into East Libya.
But while you were traveling through West Libya, Nikita, can you tell us a little bit about how a land convoy like this works? Are you walking some of the way? Are you in a vehicle? Are you accompanying the trucks? Are you in charge of a particular aspect of the land convoy while you are with it?
Um, there were 250 of us, right? About 50 of us are international, so to speak. The other 200 people are from the Maghreb region, from the North African countries, right? Mauritania, Libya itself, Algeria, Tunisia, and all. Uh, so we were in a bunch of buses, all of us. We were traveling by buses. From Tripoli to the East Libya checkpoint is just barely 6 to 7 hours, actually. But the journey is through the coastal road, and there is a lot of checkpoints again within West Libya. So there are a lot of halts. We ended up traveling for almost a day and a half just to reach the midpoint between Tripoli and Sirte, and then we stayed overnight. We also Nelson Mandela's grandson, Chief Mandla, had come and given us some, encouragement when we were in that halt. Uh, and then it took another day to get to the Sirte checkpoint camp. And even though the traveling journey was short, like a day and a half, the camping was the major part of it, because to get permissions to, while we are negotiating with Red Crescent, with East Libya, with Egypt, we're just waiting. It was just a waiting game. So we were just camped out, uh, cooking for ourselves, cooking for 15, 20 people, trying to keep the spirits up, setting up functioning toilets where we were, because there was nothing at the camp near Sirte, uh, and just trying to get through the waiting period, which is mentally quite exhausting, physically also quite exhausting. It's different temperatures during the day and night and all kinds of things. So yeah, that's what it was like.
Yeah. And Nikita, you mentioned that 10 of your compatriots, 10 Global Sumud land convoy volunteers, they were kidnapped in East Libya as they made the decision of proceeding. And these activists are all notably civilians, and they are from countries like the US, Tunisia, Argentina, Portugal, Italy, Uruguay, Poland, and Spain. And they are still being detained. And I'm curious as to how you see this situation. Are you in touch with the authorities who are trying to get them out? Is a section of the land convoy able to proceed without them, or are they also camping, waiting for them to return?
So uh, see, initially, the East Libya side, the security forces that were present there at the checkpoint allowed 10 people to enter in. It was with their permission and on their upon their invitation that these 10 comrades of ours went inside to try to negotiate a way further, right? Because they had cut off all communication with us. And we are here for a humanitarian cause. And if we are all participants of this international uh, uh, laws and all, then they should at least hear us out, right? And that's what happened. They were invited in, and then they were put into unmarked vehicles. And then what we got to know much later was they were immediately flown to Benghazi, which is a city in East Libya, and they've been kept in a location where you can't where it's not disclosed. It took many days for the Italy has a consulate in East Libya. It took many days for them to establish communication with the 10 people. And these are the Libyan Arab Armed Forces, right? LAAF, and the Eastern Internal Security Agency that has done this. Uh, so yeah, it's been more than 20 days now that they've been in there, and it's very tough for us to get any communication back and forth. Finally, there is some level of legal representation. They were already heard twice by the magistrate or something, and there was no legal representation on their side. uh, Initially they were detained for 15 days, and then and then it was extended by another 30 days. That's what we got to know, not even through official sources. It was told to the families somehow, and then they shared it with us. And we are still trying to get the legal document that verifies this information. So it's and if we feel like this on the outside, that there is no communication, and we are so stressed about this, I can't even imagine what the 10 inside feel like when they don't hear from us. They're not able to share what they are going through with us. We did get to know that the conditions also weren't that good. When you're just here, I mean, you've detained humanitarians, but the way they're being treated is nothing to do with humanitarian work. They're being treated as something else. And I believe that's not right. Uh, the conditions weren't good. I think now it's slightly better, is what we've been told. At least they're able to mingle with each other. Uh, but it needs to get better, and they need to be released immediately. There is no reason for them to hold them back. There is no valid reason or legitimate reason for them to even be uh, in this position at all. They are political hostages at this point. There's nothing short of that.
Nikita, you described making the decision to come back once you realized that there was not going to be enough legal help for you. Should you be one of those who are kidnapped, who are not allowed to proceed? I'm also curious as to the logistical hoops that you had to jump through once you decided to travel to aid the people. You've noted in an earlier interview to the Police Project that you were well aware of the trials that such a choice would put you through. Indians, we are no strangers to visa demands, but as we see participation in righteous causes, they are penalized worldwide. As you just said, your colleagues in East Libya are in jail. I'm curious as to how you viewed this apparent inconvenience that is associated with acts like your decision to join the convoy.
Yeah. Uh, you know, the land convoy, when it was attempted last year under Global March to Gaza, Egypt had said that you have come here for a humanitarian purpose. Your tourist visa is not valid for acts like this. So it makes you think that all these rules that have been set up are not to help the people do good things, right? These rules, these institutions, this system has been set up by people in power to help continue their control and their to help maintain power in their hands, right? Whereas in a democracy, you always hear it's for the people by the people, but that's really not the case, and that's what this whole process is also highlighting, right? Not being able to get visas. Turkey, we couldn't get Turkey visa when we wanted to go for the sea convoy. Having so many hurdles within uh, our country to enable all of this work. uh, it just goes to show that the system is created for someone else, not for the majority citizens of this world who are just ordinary citizens who just want to do something good, right? And it is my constitutional right that I should be able to do this. And my country should also protect these rights that I have, that my country gave me, right? So as long as the system isn't set right for us, we have to continue doing what we have to do, because this is not okay. This is clearly not okay. We are seeing a genocide unfold in front of our eyes on big screens for the last 2.5 years, and that's not okay. The fact that our governments are not doing anything to stop it makes them complicit. In fact, we are also aiding and abetting the genocide that's happening with the arms exchange that keeps happening between our country and Israel, right? So yeah, they do whatever they do for their reasons. I know why I'm doing this. I'm doing it for humanitarian reasons. And many others in India also want to do the same. Many others across the world want to do this for humanitarian reasons, to break the siege on Gaza, this illegal blockade on Gaza, and to stop colonization from advancing. And yeah, that's why we're doing this.
Nikita, as you rightly said, there have been calls from within India to get India to not be as involved with Israel in its arms exchange program. And you've also said earlier that India's image in Israel's attacks on Palestinians, it's been shaped by the people in power. We recently did see Israel Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu claim that all 1.4 billion Indians are deep lovers of Israel. This is something that irks you and something you've shown with your actions that you are unwilling to digest, so to speak. Would you like to speak on this, on your role as an Indian, to put forth an Indian perspective that is perhaps different from the government's?
I think my actions already have uh, put it across that my view on the Israel Gaza issue is different from, let's say, the actions put across by the Indian government. And regarding what states people say, I mean, they have the media at their beck and call. They have said many, many things that have been contradicted and that have been proved wrong. And my actions and many other Indians' actions also will prove them wrong. I don't need to use my words for it. My actions prove it.
These are powerful words, Nikita. Thanks so much for joining us. That's all from us.